just over, I'd say, 12 years ago now, I used to have a lot of anxiety. Anxiety was the first experiences that I started having where I started becoming a little bit more introverted and self-conscious. Started to recognize things that were happening inside of me. And to be honest, when it came to anxiety for me, it wasn't so much of a nervousness or, this stressed feeling. That was a small part of it, but more than anything, what most people didn't explain to me at the time is that anxiety to me was completely physical. It was a bunch of physical symptoms. So, for example, my digestion, I was anxious and my digestion stopped working completely. I went into a fight or flight response, which actually causes troubles with the digestive system, which I found out later. But I couldn't digest the foods that I was eating. I used to get really short of breath all the time, and I used to get these dizzy spells. So those three combined, it put me into a bit of a stress state. So the stress and fear came after the physical symptoms. And with these physical symptoms, I started to get really stressed and started to think that there was something physically wrong with me. The first thing I went to is that, I must be sick, there must be something wrong with me. And I ended up thinking that I need to go to the doctors to get a test, to go and do blood tests and see, all the things started coming through, like what happens if this is cancer, all these irrational thoughts. But those thoughts actually gripped me to the point where I developed this chronic fear of getting sick. That chronic fear of getting sick didn't allow me to go to the doctor. Something so simple as a blood test would solve all my answers, but the fear grew so strong that there's a part of me that didn't want to know, just in case that there was something wrong with me. So I pushed it all down, and the anxiety just grew and grew and grew. And the more the anxiety grew and the physical symptoms grew, so did my physical symptoms. My digestion got really bad, and I had to give up wheat and gluten, had to give up dairy, all these things. I gave up a bit of meat on the side. All these things are really hard to digest. I started to give up, and as a result of that, naturally, I started to lose weight. And I ended up losing something like 7 kilos in the first 6 weeks. And now you can already imagine, before I even gave up these foods, I had this fear that something's wrong with me and I'm getting sick. And now all of a sudden, I'm starting to lose 7 kilos. And the first thing I do, which I shouldn't have done, is instead of going to the actual doctor and getting a check and just clarifying what's going on, I went to Google Doctor to try and find my own answers. And then you just saw all these, diagnoses started to come. And then I just got overwhelmed with fear. I remember at times I used to cry myself to sleep at night just thinking that I'm dying. Until eventually I self-diagnosed myself with a terminal illness. It sounds crazy to hear, but in my direct experience, I was 100% certain that I'm dying and I'm terminal and this is it. Too petrified to go to the doctor. I just kind of sat with that on my own, too scared to even go near it. I didn't want to talk about it. No one knew that I was going through this. Some people close to me kind of knew, but eventually this fear grew so strong that every single thing that happened, I just started to get panic attacks. Someone would comment, you've lost some weight. Boom, panic attack. Someone would mention anything about the doctor. Boom, panic attack. Anything to do with these health symptoms just put me into such a panic until eventually I was with a friend, and completely off topic. We weren't even talking about panic and stuff. We were just surfing together. And he asked me, have you ever heard of this philosopher called Alan Watts? And I'd never even gotten into philosophy or anything. I was just surfing. I was kind of partying, having a good time. And he gave me this talk, and it was only 3 minutes, and I listened to it. And as soon as I listened to it, something happened. And words cannot really describe it, but he mentioned something, that who I was is more than just the physical form. And something happened to me where I felt this overwhelming sense of peace, unconditional love, interconnectedness to everyone. And the one thing I remember physically is that I had all this, it felt like goosebumps coming up my arms, down my legs. And I remember just the feeling of arriving in this life. That's what it felt like. That's why it felt like an awakening, or that's why they maybe call it awakening, is the feeling that I'm awake. This is who I really am. This is my essential nature. And I remember just pulling over my car. I was in traffic going to work. So nowhere special, nowhere in the mountains, in the Himalayas, nowhere by a river. I was in possibly the most frustrating place you could be, which was traffic going into the city. And I remember just pulling over because I was kind of late for work that day, kind of going through as a rush. And then I had this experience and I pulled over and everything was just working harmoniously. I remember looking at the lady next to me in the car, just in awe of everything that happened. And this experience lasted for about 2 to 3 months, just feeling this interconnectedness to the lady in the car next to me, to nature, to myself, to everything. I remember just being purely at peace. That's the best way I can describe it. And this experience slowly faded away. And I came back to not who I was before, but a new, different part of myself. And that experience was really big, and I didn't know what to make of it, because now I've, going to work in the city. I've got my friends that I'm partying with, we're surfing, and we're doing all these different things that brought me fulfillment. And all of a sudden they didn't. Everything that I pursued before that experience completely just fell away. I was no longer interested in relationships. I was no longer interested in the work that I did. I was no longer interested in the sports that brought me joy and the friends that brought me laughter. And it was a really hard thing to navigate, because I've had this big experience and no one around me at the time had any idea what it was. I tried to explain to people and kind of people thought that I was crazy. And I actually remember getting to the point when anyone asked me, what's happening with you? You've changed. I remember distinctly always saying to them, I can tell you, but if I tell you, you're going to think I'm crazy, because that was the comment I kept getting back. So it was a really profound experience, but there was no space for it. And I was like in the society that didn't support it. And I'll get into that later in some different talks, hopefully. But integrating this experience has been one of the most difficult things I find about it, because there was this high that you can get addicted to, this feeling connected, all-loving, experience, peace experience that takes away any type of enjoyment you've ever had and quadruples it by, you can't even put a number on it. It's to me, I remember the experience saying, like, this is what everyone is seeking. That was the first experience that I had with it. I was like, this is what everyone is seeking. So it's a really, really powerful experience. And we could ask, why does it matter? Why does it matter? But over the 10 years or 12 years since I've had that experience, it's led me to try and understand it more. So I've traveled to the East, I've traveled all over the world trying to find teachers and lectures. I went into studying. I just finished my master's degree in transpersonal psychology, where I specifically wrote my dissertation on how to integrate spiritual experiences using specific methods. And that brought a whole new world of understanding, which is why I'm actually starting this channel, to share these different types of understandings or insights that I've found. So the other thing is, why does it matter? There's a really interesting concept that spiritual awakenings happen throughout all cultures in the world. They have happened throughout history, throughout time. If you ever go to, say, for example, Japanese Zen traditions, they talk about an experience called Satori, which means sudden enlightenment. You know, if you go to the Islamic culture, they talk about baraka, which means divine grace. And even in Christianity, they talk about the topic divine grace itself. So all these different cultures have different words for it, and they explain it in different ways. But it's an experience that is real. It's a phenomenon that is real, and it's something that needs to be addressed and understood. Because once you've had this experience, trying to integrate that into your life, because all the things that I ran away from, for example, like I said, relationships, friends, work, sports, these are all super important in life. You need these things. And on my spiritual path, I kind of dropped them away. So as part of my integration process over the 12 years is starting to bring those back and find, you know, how to find place for this newfound experience. So this channel that I am starting here is to maybe support people that have had that experience and are looking for ways to make sense of it, to make a community so you don't have to go through what I went through, where you have to run away from everything, that you can continue doing what you're doing, but have somewhere you can go to kind of talk about that. If you see in the comments, or not in the comments, in the description of this video, I'll put a link to my Skool community. It's for free, and it's an integration circle for people that have had spiritual experiences to come and join and share their experiences, share their insights, for all of us, you know, to kind of learn from each other. So this is my first video. If you have any other recommendations for me, or if you have any other things you'd like to hear from me, let me know. But this is the first of the series of spiritual awakening, so I hope you like it, and I hope you tune into the next one.